I'm going to go ahead and start early because church got out early. So I know that Nancy Anderson has an announcement. Are there any other people who would like to make announcements before we get started? Nancy.
It's on.
That's
on. Good morning. I just want to let you know next week I'm hoping you all come back because the Plymouth Peace and Justice Committee is sponsoring what I think is going to be a really valuable educational type effort. We're having Helen Eddy, the director of Polk County Health Department, who I didn't even realize was a Plymouth member until she came and talked to us at our committee, and we met her and learned all about her program. And she's been a member for a long time. I guess there's just so many people at Plymouth, it's hard to know them all, right? And she is going to be telling us about this program that she's sponsoring through the Polk County Health Department, and they're collaborating with people all over town and throughout the county. And it's because she found out in statistics that one of the main reasons for death of children and young people in Polk County is guns. And so she says she considers this an epidemic, a health epidemic, and she says there's got to be something we can do to cut down on the number of deaths that we're finding. So she started a program. She's got a lot of people collaborating with her, and it's a multifaceted program. And it really is something that I think, if put into place, can really cut down on the number of deaths. That's why I think we were really excited to hear her presentation when she came to talk to us. Besides Helen, Sarah Hayes and Hannah Hayes will be speaking too. Sarah they're both Plymouth members as well. And so Sarah she's Des Moines Moms Demand Action head. She heads up that group, and her daughter is a director for March for Our Lives in Iowa. So it's about gun safety. The whole program is going to be about gun safety, and I think you'll really learn a lot from it. Thanks.
Do I understand, Mary, that you have an announcement of some kind? Be fair to those online.
Yeah. Many of you are subscribers, I'm guessing, to Julie Gamick's Potluck, and it is both a free and paid newsletter. So you don't have to be a paid subscriber to zoom in with her on Mondays at noon, even though Moral Mondays is certainly also worth your effort. Tomorrow, Monday, at noon, Julie's Potluck will have two guests, Doctors Emily Bavers, an MD from Waverly, and Dr. Francesca Turner, who is at Broadlawns. Both are OBGYN docs, and they are going to talk about their new organization called Iowans for Health Liberty. So they are on the front lines practicing healthcare, and they will then tell you more about this new organization and how you can both participate or listen and be educated. Thank you.
Okay. So first I need to reiterate the sponsor organization of bringing Connie in here. We are now not PJPAN, but PJN, Plymouth Justice Network. And I know a lot of you are already getting emails and alerts from us many times a week sometimes. But we can be a powerful voice at the legislature. So sign up if you haven't. I brought sheets that tell about it that people can sign up. If you want to pick up a sheet. Okay, so they're here for picking up. So let me introduce Connie, although I'm sure not many of you don't know her. So since 2002, Connie Ryan has served as Executive Director of the Interfaith Alliance of Iowa. She's a well-known voice in the public square, speaking out to protect religious freedom while ensuring it is not used to harm or discriminate, advancing civil rights and fairness for those who are marginalized. Connie serves as the organization's lobbyist, effectively shaping public policy at the Iowa State House. Connie chairs Justice Not Politics, the state's leading organization fighting to maintain fair and impartial judiciary. She has served on many nonprofit boards, including One Iowa, Iowa Safe Schools, Iowa Citizen Action Network, Friends of Iowa Legal Aid, and Iowa Immigration Education Coalition. She was named the 2019 Woman of Influence by the Des Moines Business Record and has been honored by the Iowa Association for Justice, Iowa Safe Schools, Des Moines Education Association, and she was the 2013 Des Moines Human Rights Commission Mary Louise Smith awardee. Connie holds a Master of Social Work from the University of Iowa and a BA from Drake University. Please welcome Connie.
It is always good to be at Plymouth because I always feel like I've come home. And it is a mix of faces that I've known for a very long time and new faces as well. So thank you so much. Many of you know that my mom was Pat Oberbillig, who served at Plymouth for 10 years. And so I have walked these halls many times, as well as Plymouth. Oh, look, and my stepdad too. So who just came back from Mexico, by the way. So he goes to Mexico and he just turned 90. So yeah. We joked, so a couple of weeks ago, my daughter-in-law turns 30 this coming week. I turned 60 2 weeks ago, and Bob turned 90 this week. So, you know, we do things in 30s or something. Anyway, it is good to be with you, and I am always grateful to Plymouth and all of the work that you do, the work that Sheena talked about, and always using your voices, always standing up for people of Iowa who need your voice, but also partnering in so many other ways. You have been core to the work of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, Alicia, and many of you helping to start Interfaith Alliance 28 years ago, but also doing things like allowing us to use your space for Crossroads and other events as well, and just generally supporting the work of Interfaith Alliance. So I'm grateful to all of you. Sheena asked me to talk about the legislature and the work that is happening there. I'm sure that most of you know just as much as I do about what is up there, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we are doing there. As I was listening to Sheena read my bio, there was a phrase in there of effectively shaping the policies at the State House, or something to that effect. Right? And you know, you write those bios and like you give them to the people who ask for them or whatever. But when you said that word, I was like, wow, I really should change that. Because it infers that, you know, that we would side with what's happening at the State House, and we know that's simply not true. So I'll have to work on that. I'm not sure what adjective to use, or anyway. Many of you are on our email list, so some of this is going to be familiar, and so I apologize for that ahead of time, but since we're talking about the legislature, I, of course, use the tools that we already have. If you're not on our email list, and I'm going to send these around, I'm going to also send some papers around. I think I have enough of papers. And if you're already on our email list, you don't need to sign up again. If you know that you get the email every Tuesday, which is kind of general information, and the email that we get every Friday, you get every Friday for the legislative work, you don't need to add your name to But if you don't get it, I highly recommend it. Obviously, I'm a little partial, but I do think that it's good information for the social justice issues that are happening at the State House. So there's a lot happening. Every year, people say to me, what else can they do? And I see Matt McCoy back there, and he knows that they can do a whole lot more, right? And so I encourage people to not say that, because it kind of jinxes us and lets them, challenges them to do more things. And you've seen in the news, the biggest topic, of course, are the AEAs. And I was just talking to Janet Peterson down the hall, and it's fascinating because of all the issues that have been so challenging and so hard to even wrap your head around, this one has really resonated as a nonpartisan issue. People get how important the AEAs are in Iowa. People understand that they serve all children in different ways. They certainly are the lead on special education services and making sure that kids get the services that they need, but they do just a gamut of services, supporting rural and urban schools, particularly rural. There are things that rural schools cannot do. They just don't have the resources to do that. And AEAs step in and are able to provide some of those services to train teachers, to train administrators, to provide media supports, just a lot of different things, in addition to all of the special education. So it has resonated with people. And if you have sent an email, or if you have called your legislator, if you have sent a note to the governor, thank you for doing that. If you haven't, I encourage you to do that. It is important. And so I'm going to pass around some information about that. If you saw the email on Friday, there was take action on that. Some of these are double-sided, some of them are stapled because my printer was having issues with the double-sided. So now some of them are stapled. If you're a couple, I encourage you just to take one for your household, because I don't know if there's going to be enough. So you saw some of this information in the Friday's email. This is a little bit longer, more extensive list. And I'm going to talk about Moral Mondays in a minute. But if you come to Moral Mondays tomorrow, we're also doing some advocacy after that. You'll see this same paper tomorrow as well. Feel free to bring it with you as well. But it's just critically important that we use our voices and make sure that we are talking with folks about these issues. Our legislative priorities are expansive. We are a multi-issue, broad spectrum of issues. And we come from a perspective, first and foremost, about religious freedom and making sure that we are protecting the, how would you say it? The traditional, we're not very traditional, but the traditional definition of religious freedom, so that the government can't impose its views on taking one particular religion and imposing it on other folks. That's kind of the traditional way of doing that. We know that that has morphed over the years, and so we are seeing more and more attacks on people using religion, that I get to have my religion and I get to impose it on Robin. And so a lot of the pieces of legislation really come at it from that perspective. It might be draped in other ways. It might be saying, well, you know, we shouldn't be able to do this or we shouldn't be able to do that. But it really, at the core of it, is oftentimes taking religion and imposing it on other people. And so that's where we first start our work. And so that takes us down a road to different ways. So it might be on LGBTQ rights. It might be on reproductive health care rights. It might be on immigrant rights. It might be on racial justice rights. It might be on, interestingly, gun safety. There are different things that kind of weave its way, both in terms of religious freedom, but also marginalizing people. And so that's kind of where our perspective comes from. And so I'm going to pass around another piece of paper, because you need more pieces of paper. And I want you to just kind of take a look at some of these issues. These are our legislative priorities. They're very similar every year. We did add gun safety issues after Sandy Hook in 2013, because, and the reason why people ask me often, why do we do gun safety issues? It is primarily because people who are impacted by gun violence are from marginalized communities. That includes smaller religious traditions, so people who are Jewish, people who are Muslim, people who are Sikh, but also Black and brown communities. And so we were asked many, many times. Sally Peterson was a person who kept asking me, you all need to do this issue, even before Sandy Hook. And so we added that piece about 10, 11 years ago. But you'll see on this list, separation of religion and government at the top of the list. That's the core piece of who we are as an organization and where we come from. And then, as I said earlier, that kind of trickles down through the other issues that we work on. Civil rights and non-discrimination, so you can see a long list of issues that we work on at the legislature. I try and write these in ways where we support things. People get tired of opposing everything, right? We get tired of opposing everything. So I try and write them in a way that support, but sometimes I just can't find the words. And so sometimes we just have to say we're opposed to different things. Strong public schools is a key piece of the work. We know that over the last couple of years, our public schools have been attacked time and time again. Our educators have been attacked time and time again. They have been demeaned, they have been harmed, they have been villainized. And so we are always going to stand with our public school teachers, our public school educators, administrators, staff, to make sure that there is a voice that is standing up with them. Iowa State Education Association is one of our strongest ally organization, partner organizations. And so that is a critical issue. Reproductive rights is a big piece of the work, and I'm always thankful for Mary Ritchie and the work that she's doing with the doctors, and many of you that have done work, whether it's with Planned Parenthood or other organizations. And we come from that. It's not that we are saying that you should have an abortion, it's that you get to make your own personal decision, and that somebody else's religion, the government, should not impede on the ability to make that decision. We work alongside worker organizations, unions, et cetera, and make sure worker rights, immigrant rights has long time been part of the work that we do. I talked about gun safety, judicial independence. We started that work amazingly after the Varnum decision when the courts got attacked, and that's when Justice Not Politics was also created. It's a separate organization. I do chair that, but that's a coalition of folks who work on judicial independence. And then the death penalty. Because we know that the death penalty disproportionately impacts, again, marginalized communities. Yes, ma'am. Are there folks that, oh, here we go, let's see how far this goes. And again, if you're a couple and can share, that would be great, or from the same household. So back to the legislature currently, I talked about the AEAs. There's some bills that are really alarming that have been introduced, and they really have started fast and furious again this year. They have tended to do that the last couple of years. One of the bills that I always have to be careful when I predict things because sometimes they come true, right? And in Texas, they had a law that was passed this past year where it mandated that school districts had to consider, they had to vote, literally mandated that school districts had to vote whether or not they were going to hire chaplains, whether they were regulated or not, whether they were licensed or not, but they had to vote on whether or not to hire chaplains to replace other school personnel, particularly school counselors. Think about that. So there are a lot of faith traditions that have chaplains, and they are ordained ministers. They go through training. My mom was one of those. There are formal processes of training. But there are a lot of faith traditions, a lot of denominations that do not. They don't require any kind of training, not for their clergy, not for their chaplains. So you can have an unlicensed, unregulated, untrained person who calls themselves a chaplain. I decided to go into a church and I'm like, I'm a chaplain with no training, and school districts hire them to be essentially the school counselors. So when that bill happened, and it got watered down, our national office was part of that, Christians Against Christian Nationalism, which is part of Baptist Joint Committee, was part of that work to try and get it watered down. So it was from the original version of it. But when I started seeing this information, I said, that's going to come to Iowa. And by God, this week it was introduced. It's different than what I just described. So it's not a mandate. It allows volunteer chaplains or the district to hire chaplains. And it doesn't mention in replacement of school personnel, that kind of stuff. But it is still the same dangerous path. And obviously I have no problem with chaplains and ministers. Like I have several in my family. But the idea of somebody who is not specifically trained to work with kids, to provide counseling to kids in a school setting, and to make sure that they are not imposing their religion on children, that is alarming to me. And so we will continue to monitor that. We will continue to have a voice on that. As I said, it was just introduced this week. And we will probably get some chaplains. What they did in Texas is they had chaplains sign on to a letter that this is not a good idea, and that this is not the role that chaplains should be playing. So if it has any kind of legs, we'll probably do that as well. So I just want to alert you to that. There's also a bill under religious freedom and civil rights. There's a bill that it's called the Protections for Healthcare Institutions, Healthcare Payers, and Medical Practitioners, including those related to the exercise of a right of conscience. So this is a conscience clause bill that would allow healthcare institutions, insurers, so institutions and insurers and providers to claim a conscience clause that says, I don't have to provide services. I don't have to pay for services, coverage. So that is, we've not seen that broad of a scope on a conscience clause. We've seen conscience clause legislation, but not that broad of a scope. Other bill from last year that we're paying attention to is the gender balance bill. It was introduced last year. You have seen the fight over gender balance in the courts and the federal case that was just decided a couple of weeks ago. We do assume that they will move. It may not be this bill, but we do assume that they will move to try and take out gender balance in all of our commissions and boards in the state and at the local level as well. And so if you don't know, for decades, we have had gender balance at the state level, where in a commission and a board, there has to be an equal number of women and men. Then it was added at the local level, I forget, 15 or so years ago. Matt, do you remember? Yeah. That it had to also be at the local level, an even number. That has been a fight for a couple of years to be able to retain keeping gender balance. And their argument is that we don't need it anymore. Because we know that we've fixed sexism, and we know that we've fixed all of the gender gap. I don't say this out loud to many people, but I would rather add more categories of balance, right? I would rather add more categories of race and gender identity and sexual orientation and all of the things. But they just want to to remove gender entirely. So because of the court case, the federal court case, I would imagine that we will see that moving, either this bill or other legislation. A reminder that all bills from last year are still alive this year. So we have 2 years in a legislature. And so whatever was introduced last year and was not acted upon is alive again this year. And so in the Friday email, I didn't put all of the bills from last year because there were a lot. In the second year, I tend to just put the bills that we see any kind of movement on, or we think that there's going to be any kind of movement on. So there are still a whole lot of other ones that they could bring to life again. But what we're seeing on LGBTQ rights is legislation that would prohibit counties and cities from exercising their right to protect their citizens from banning conversion therapy. You probably saw this in the news this week. This is a local control issue. Cities and counties should be able to do this. This came out of a situation in Waterloo. And the way that our laws, and this is going to take me into really difficult territory, and because there's lawyers and legislators and former legislators in the room. But when the law is silent at the state level, local government should be able to write ordinances, et cetera, that protect their citizens. That should be a right, and that's the way that our state has always operated. And more we are seeing different pieces of legislation that take away local control, and this is one of them. And when you talk about conversion therapy, you should always do so with quotes around it, right? So it's hard to do when you're speaking without doing air quotes. Conversion therapy is not therapy. Conversion therapy is harmful. It is dangerous. It is trying to take someone and make them into something they are not, usually for religious purposes. And there is a lot of data of when a child goes through conversion therapy, the mental health repercussions from that therapy, the increase in suicidality, the efforts to take their own life, it increases exponentially. And so it is not therapy, it is harmful, it is dangerous. But many people, many legislators who are conservative, right-wing Christian, believe that it is saving those children. And so we continue to make the argument of the harm that can do. And if they're not going to take any kind of effort at the state level to protect children and ban conversion therapy, then local leaders should be able to do and take that action as well. There's a whole lot of other things that are happening at the state level. In regard to reproductive health care, people ask me if I think that the constitutional amendment is going to go for a second time. So constitutional amendment was passed a couple of years by the state. Our process for constitutional amendments is it has to be passed twice with an election in between those two. So it either had to pass for a second time last year or this year. Otherwise, it is dead, and they can start the process over again. But it has to pass this year now because they didn't pass last year if they want it on the ballot. And the constitutional amendment is really wiping out any kind of reproductive health care access to safe and legal abortion across the board. I do not think, I'm going to say this out loud, this is always dangerous, I do not think they're going to run the bill. Word on the street is they being Republicans know that it is not a popular item, that it will not pass in all likelihood, and that it could actually harm their chances in November if it's on the ballot. And so after Kansas happened, and then we had Kentucky, and then we had Ohio, and then we had Ohio again, it just doesn't seem like that would be a smart choice. And although we don't like a lot of the things that they do, they being Republicans at the State House we know that they also are strategic. They do make strategic decisions, and so I just don't think that we're going to see it. Will we see something else? Could be. The item that is most talked about is limiting or banning the medicine that is used for abortion. So we could see that kind of legislation that would outlaw in Iowa mifepristone and I forget the other one. Yeah. The two major, I'm looking at Mary Ritchie. And so we could see that kind of legislation that would limit the ability to access reproductive health care in the state of Iowa. There is the MOMS program also. MOMS program already exists, and it is a maternal option to be able to, on the surface, is supposed to help support pregnant women. What it really does is give money to what we call fake anti-abortion clinics to keep women from making the decision to have an abortion. And those clinics usually don't have any kind of personnel, healthcare personnel. They're usually not accredited. And so it is the state giving money. It's been interesting because that was actually passed first in 2022. And they put out RFPs for those clinics and got none that were actually qualified. And then they added more money last year, even though they didn't have any that were even qualified. They put out another RFP, still didn't get anybody, actually turned one of the providers down. And so now they want to bring it in-house to the state to be able to operate it. So this is the legislation that we're seeing. They could still, if somebody stepped up that supposedly met the criteria, they could still do that. But now they're wanting to actually bring it in-house to the state. So we are opposed to that on general principles, but we're also opposed to it because there are no guardrails that would keep a provider from imposing their religious either on staff or on recipients of the service. And the last one I'll highlight, actually two more that I'll highlight, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. One is the gun omnibus bill is still alive. It was passed in the House last year and is eligible for consideration in the Senate. There is a Senate version and a House version, and they are different. And what I like to do when they are arguing with each other and it's a bill that we don't like is just to create chaos. So as long as we can keep them fighting over the issues and the main issues between the two of them, part of the bill, we just had Perry High School, right? And we're gonna see them talk about guns. I know this is going to happen. They're going to wait a few more weeks, but they're going to talk about guns, and they're going to talk about, see, if we just had more guns in the school, we could have protected. That's what they're going to do. If we just had staff carrying guns that would have protected. And we know that's not true. Law enforcement tells you that's not true. If somebody comes into your home and you go get a gun, it's more likely that you're going to be the one injured. It's more likely that you're going to be the one that is dead. Law enforcement will tell you, go call 911 and hide or run, not go get a gun. And so the idea that we're going to have this omnibus gun debated in our legislature is just beyond me, but I am quite sure it's going to happen. And part of that bill would allow for guns to be in a car on school grounds. Part of that bill would demand that insurers could not deny a school insurance if they have a policy, like we've seen in a couple of districts, from having staff carry guns. Insurers would not be able to deny insurance. That is the piece that we hold on to, because business does not like that part of the bill. It also prohibits employers of any business, including churches, there is no carve out, from denying somebody having a gun in their car on the property of the employer. Business doesn't like that either. So that's what we hang our hat on, is getting business. Business has been very strong against the bill, and is why last year it did not get through the Senate. So we will continue to make that fight. The last one that I'll highlight is the death penalty. We have a new death penalty bill. It is an across-the-board, straight-up death penalty bill. And I don't know if it will move. We see a death penalty bill every year, but usually it is attached with other things like sexual assault, rape. This one is just a plain death penalty bill. And so concerned that it is a Brad John bill, but concerned that that it could have legs because we've not seen this for a while. Usually it has had other pieces attached to it. So that's a whole lot. Sorry to be depressing. But I'm happy to answer any questions that I can answer.
Well, among the things that happened during Bob Way administration, when I was there from 73 to 76, about everything we did has been repealed, including home rule, which came on before the 1970s. It was Amendment 1968, I believe. But the AEA bill is the most anti-rural bill that I've ever seen. We passed that in 74. It was fought out because the county superintendents did not want to be replaced, which were basically non-functional in a lot of counties. It was kind of an honorary position. It was a joke. And I basically, part of it was it was an anti-consolidation argument that was made, is that basically if you had services that could be provided that districts couldn't provide, that were forcing them to go consolidate, they could do it. And school districts, school boards elect the members on the AEA board. So the thing about giving schools more power, they already have the power to elect the board members that run the AEAs, and those people decide what the policies are, what the services you need. Among the services they provide are training for educators on all kinds of things, technology. They provide purchasing services, so you don't have to have a purchasing agent in the school district. And if you're a small school district, you're really at the mercy of a salesperson to come in and sell whatever you want without somebody checking it out or doing specifications on it. So if the rural schools really figure out what this does to them, this won't ever get anywhere. The other thing that she put in this bill is the most disingenuous part of the whole thing, is to have the state set a minimum salary for teachers. Well, it's a backdoor way of, we've already done away with collective bargaining. Thank you for reminding me how depressed I really am, because I was one of the 18 Republicans in the House that voted for that. The Republican-controlled Senate voted almost unanimously for the collective bargaining bill under Art News' leadership over there. What I think it is, it's a backdoor way of not of regulating salaries and how boards can set salary schedules. Again, anti-rural. They can't get people to move into a district because they can't pay a competitive salary. If you're a female wanting to go to a rural school district, you have no health care within an hour of the school district.
Right.
You can't find a place to live. You probably can't find a partner if you're single. And you have all the wage pressures that women can go do other things besides teach, which was really one of the big sources of educators in the past. That and veterans back in the 50s. If the rural schools really catch on to what this does to them, that isn't going to go anywhere.
Well, and I will tell you that the rural schools are. The legislators are saying that the issue of AEAs is one of the biggest issues that they are receiving email and contact from. So, and a lot of that is from rural. A couple of things I'll add to what you said, Ed, is it's also a power grab. So it is moving decision-making, and Ed talked about each of the school districts that are part of whatever the AEA is. They have a seat at the table on the AEA board for that area. It moves all of the control to the Department of Ed. Who controls the Department of Ed? The governor. It is an executive branch department. So she will control all of the AEAs if it happens that way. Regarding teacher salaries, there was a court case, I'm going to forget the state, I think it was Arkansas or Oklahoma this week, that had this two-tier kind of entry-level teacher salary, and then another level, which is what the bill calls for, that the bill guarantees teachers entering at, I want to say 50,000, and then at 12 years, guarantees at, I think it's 62,000. Yeah, at 12 years. Well, what that can do is you're at 50,000 and you're at 62,000, and never again will you get a salary raise. And so you will have a two-tier system with nothing of movement. And I don't know what that does. I need to talk with my labor friends, but I don't know what that does with labor contracts. We have labor contracts in place in every school district. What does that do to those labor contracts where people get to move up incrementally? People get to move up when they get a master's degree. People get to move up when they get a certificate to teach something else. People get to move up. What does that do to that if they are at 50,000 and 62,000? Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned that there's bipartisan opposition to this AEA issue, but the private school scholarship started out with bipartisan opposition as well, and then Governor Reynolds used strong arm tactics and primaried her opposition and ended up with a piece of legislation that she wanted. And then also, I was just curious, from your perspective, you're up there. Where do these bad ideas come from? Is it the American Legislative Exchange Council? Is there a lot of that? Are these white Christian nationalists just trying to outdo each other?
Yeah.
I mean, where does this, pardon the word, but crap come from?
Yeah. You know, that's interesting. It comes from a lot of different places. It is certainly ALEC is a piece of that. There are some national organizations that do anti-LGBTQ work. A lot of it comes from that. There are some national organizations that promote Christian nationalistic kind of policies. And so it comes from different places. It used to be that Iowa was the test ground for a lot of that legislation. This is my 14th legislative session. I started in 2000, I started working for the organization in 2002. I became the primary lobbyist in 2011. That was when the Tea Party years swept in after the 2010. So I thought that was bad. I would take those days back anytime now, thank you. We used to be, like if there was an idea, we used to be that test state. Now we are just taking things from other places. So the chaplain bill that I talked about is from Texas. Reproductive health care, it comes from Texas and Alabama, obviously Florida. A lot of the anti-public education comes from Florida and Texas. You get a theme there. And so they're grabbing it from other places. There are certainly organizations that push that into states, but sometimes it's just the legislators that are like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. Let's play that out in Iowa. I forget the first part of your question before we talked about. Oh, private school vouchers. It did. It's different though in a way that with AEAs, they know children that use those services. They know families that use those services. It is such a broad spectrum of services that people understand at a very core level that help children to do better in school, to thrive, that help teachers to learn, that help teachers, administrators to learn, that provide very concrete printing services for small rural schools, media service for small rural schools and districts. So it's different than the vouchers, and it did start bipartisan, but she has gotten so much, my understanding, I don't talk with her every day, meaning the governor, my understanding is she's gotten so much pushback, both from the public, but also internally. I know that the governor's office had a meeting with Senate leadership this past week, and specifically on this. And both legislators and the governor's office have received so much pushback on this. I'm not saying there's not going to be an AEA bill. It is not going to look like what she proposed. I also know that before the condition of the state happened, she told legislators that she wanted this bill to be top priority. She wanted it to go through, and she wanted it to go without amendment. And that is not going to happen. They're talking about an amendment. And she's backed away from the bill. She's backed away from the amendment even, so she. Yeah.
It's really more of a comment. You talk about the power grab. I had the occasion to join in on the Iowa Civil Rights Commission last week. And as you know, I was on the commission for over a decade. And that commission is just an example, I think, of what's already happened in state government in terms of this state grab and the centralization of power in the governor's office, not even in the agencies. So one of the commissioners was concerned about a gender balance, and he wanted the Civil Rights Commission to take a position and lobby against this gender balance bill. Well, first of all, the executive director has already recommended that the Civil Rights Commission support of doing away with gender balance without even consulting with the commissioners who already have power to take positions on policy issues. That is stated in the Iowa Code. And so the commissioners were trying to figure out how could they take positions. And I just read, this one commissioner had invited several of us as former commissioners or directors to speak and talk about what we used to do on the Civil Rights Commission under the powers that were granted to us. And so I just pulled out minutes from a meeting in December of 2008 and just read through the things that the commissioners and the commission were engaged in. And afterwards, one of the commissioners said, well, I like those ideas. We should talk more about being engaged in some of these issues. I mean.
Well, and if I can add to that, Alicia, I'll do this really quick, Sheena. The reorg really did damage to our state government and putting things in different places. And the Civil Rights Commission is part of that. They are no longer their own standalone Civil Rights Commission. They are underneath another department. And so even more underneath the thumb of the governor, and there's even layers in between that. Governor Branstad started this. It used to be that there was more independence. Certainly they were, tops of all the departments were appointed by the governor, but there was more independence. The departments got to do what they were supposed to do by code. They were department heads, Department of Education. They were people who were actually in the education system. They were trained, they were part of that. And now what we're seeing is, and this started in the Branstad administration, but really the Reynolds administration has taken it to a whole nother level of controlling the professionals who are supposed to be running state government on behalf of the people. And we're not seeing that anymore because of the control from the governor's office. And so that is concerning. And the reorganization bill actually just ramped that up exponentially. Two things I want to highlight really quickly. I talked about Moral Mondays a little bit. Moral Mondays is conveniently every Monday. During the legislative session, we highlight, it's a coalition of over 30 organizations. Interfaith is the lead organization, and organizes it. It is both in person at the State House and it is also online. You can watch it on Facebook, and it highlights a different issue every week with different speakers, legislators, and experts to really give you good, solid, factual information about whatever the issue is. And so I urge you to be part of that. I urge you to sign up to be on our email list to get good, solid, factual information. And then we're starting a new, what we're calling CAP, Capital Advocacy Priorities. So following Moral Mondays, we're going to rotate between Mondays and Tuesdays. So one Monday after Moral Mondays, the next week it'll be on a Tuesday, of bringing people to the State House to be able to lobby on a specific issue. So this week is the first Moral Mondays. We're highlighting AEA and the capital advocacy priorities. I have to keep looking because this is new and I don't remember the words sometimes because I'm 60. And so urge you, it also will be about the AEAs, and it's actually giving you information and then helping you to go and then talk with lawmakers about the issue. So I encourage you to do that. We have a lobby day on February 19th, and then our Action Fund fundraiser is that evening, also on February 19th. And I have, if you haven't received, you should have, if you're on our mailing list, you would have received the invitation this week. It's supposed to be last week, but we had a snowstorm, you know, or two. So I have extras if you don't have the invitation for that. So thank you all so much.
Yes, let's give Connie a round of applause and get to church. Thank you.